scientific microsystems and Internet of Things platform, academic platform, to develop, design and provide, sell scientific instrumentation. So, Valentin.
Donc bonjour à tous. Donc, Valentin Marchand, ingénieur d'études pour la plateforme technologique SMIOT. Au cours de cette présentation, donc, je vais vous présenter les systèmes qu'on développe donc, au sein de SMIOT en collaboration avec l'IM2MP. Faisant partie de l'équipe, il y a Valentin GS qui n'est pas là aujourd'hui, mais qui vous passe le bonjour. Il y a moi, il y a Marion Fourniol qui est donc doctorante à l'IM2MP, qui est présente parmi nous, normalement. Donc, il était tout à l'heure. Bon. Hervé Glotin, donc, qui fait partie du LIS, et Philippe Arlotto, donc à Part2, qui a participé à la conception de certains de nos systèmes. Donc, SMIOT, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est la plateforme technologique de l'université, qui nous permet de concevoir des systèmes et de les commercialiser. La plupart du temps, c'est des systèmes qui sont issus de projets de recherche. Qu'est-ce qu'on a comme avantage? On bénéficie des équipements de pointe de l'IUT, donc typiquement tout ce qui est machine électronique, tout ce qui sert à la conception et le prototypage rapide de systèmes électroniques. Nous sommes également donc experts en électronique embarquée et en algorithme embarqué. Donc là maintenant je vais vous présenter PolyLife, qui est une carte d'acquisition de données, de diverses données. Elle sert à quoi? Elle sert c'est en gros la carte mère de notre système. Elle permet donc de synchroniser des datas issues de divers capteurs, de contrôler ce qu'on appelle des cartes filles. Donc une carte fille, c'est ce qui viendra acquérir un certain type de données. Et elle stocke évidemment le tout sur support micro SD. Donc évidemment, elle permet la gestion de l'énergie, donc l'alimentation de toutes ces cartes filles. Elle est évidemment équipée d'une puce BLE qui permet donc de pouvoir piloter le système dans le cas d'environnements compliqués. Par exemple, si on n'a pas accès à la carte en elle-même, mais qu'on veut changer la programmation, on peut le faire par exemple via Bluetooth depuis un smartphone. Elle permet également donc le déploiement de ce qu'on appelle du réseau mesh. Donc c'est du réseau de capteurs de plus ou moins, on va dire, courte portée, donc c'est de l'ordre de 20 à 50 mètres. Donc c'est un réseau de type Zigbee. Donc cette carte, elle est constituée de plusieurs ports d'extension, ce qui permet une grande modularité. Donc évidemment, on peut venir stacker les cartes les unes sur les autres. Elle permet donc, comme je l'ai dit, le couplage des données. Donc les données issues de diverses cartes filles sont synchronisées entre elles. On a la possibilité évidemment de développer sur demande des cartes filles spécifiques, donc suivant les besoins des utilisateurs. On est compatible Arduino. Alors qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Ça veut tout simplement dire, ça ne veut pas dire que notre système peut être utilisé par Arduino, mais ça veut dire l'inverse. Ça veut dire que nous, on peut utiliser tout système étant conçu pour Arduino. Donc typiquement, en gros, à quoi ça sert? Ça sert typiquement à interfacer un écran, par exemple, sans avoir besoin de développer un écran qui introduirait un coût supplémentaire dans le développement de l'application. Donc en carte d'extension, on a par exemple une carte light. Donc la carte light, à quoi elle sert? Elle permet de monitorer la luminosité avec une haute sensibilité. Donc typiquement, à quoi elle sert? Elle sert normalement à monitorer la lumière nocturne. Donc on voit sur la carte, on a 4 capteurs de luminosité ainsi que 4 filtres RGB qui permettent donc de mesurer la luminosité sur 4 composantes, rouge, vert, bleu, et la composante clear, donc en gros l'intensité lumineuse. Elle est également équipée d'un capteur UV qui permet de mesurer l'intensité du rayonnement UV. Et ça peut servir, par exemple, on a un exemple ici, donc on voit sur les courbes, on a mesuré l'éclipse de lune, donc ça s'est fait à Toulon en 2017, donc c'est lors de l'éclipse en janvier 2017. Et on peut voir les périodes donc, de l'éclipse de lune, donc on voit la chute de luminosité au cours du temps. Vient ensuite donc ce qu'on appelle la QualiLife Move. Donc qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est une carte fille, encore une fois, qui permet donc de mesurer tout ce qui concerne les mouvements. Donc c'est une carte qui est équipée d'une centrale inertielle et qui est capable d'interfacer jusqu'à 4 centrales inertielles supplémentaires externes. Donc en fait, on vient brancher typiquement les centrales inertielles supplémentaires sur cette carte-là, qu'on peut déployer sur plus ou moins longue distance via l'intermédiaire de câbles. Et ça peut servir typiquement la caractérisation, donc par exemple des vibrations, positionnement absolu parce qu'on peut ajouter un GPS dessus, donc ça permet évidemment par exemple la mesure, dans le cas de mesure, par exemple on peut mesurer la houle en mer ou typiquement le vent si on déploie ce genre de système dans les arbres. Évidemment avec le GPS on a la position absolue, donc à chaque fois on sait où a été fait la mesure, ce qui est pas mal si on déploie beaucoup de ce type de carte. Ensuite, on a développé donc, pour certaines applications notre propre micro, donc c'est le US-Uniot. Donc c'est un micro large bande qui a une réponse donc, omnidirectionnelle. Il a une très faible consommation en énergie. Un gros gain, donc on peut monter jusqu'à un gain jusqu'à 40. Il est robuste, donc ça, c'est. Alors là, on voit juste la carte non packagée, mais normalement c'est packagé dans un tube en inox. Et c'est scellé via de la résine, donc c'est étanche. Avec deux possibilités de sortie, donc ça ensuite c'est un peu plus technique, mais on a une sortie donc single-handed, donc monophile, ou alors on peut avoir une sortie différentielle, ce qui permet de déployer le micro avec une très longue distance de câble, sans avoir de perturbation due à la longueur de câble. On a aussi une carte, c'est en cours de développement, mais qui permet de mesurer donc, tout ce qui est pollution chimique. Donc cette carte-là, elle est équipée d'un hygromètre, d'un capteur de pression et de température, et de capteurs autres qui permettent de mesurer l'intensité de CO2, l'intensité de dioxyde d'azote et particules fines, donc PM2,5, PM10, ainsi que l'ozone. Voilà, donc c'est toujours pareil, c'est une carte fille qui est bien se brancher sur le système principal QualiLife. Ensuite, on a donc une autre carte qui permet donc de déclencher, donc ça c'est un trigger fréquentiel, donc ça permet de détecter une fréquence issue d'un signal donc typiquement de type audio, qui permet donc par la suite de réveiller le système QualiLife. Donc en gros, typiquement, vous voulez enregistrer, avec par exemple le système complet, vous voulez enregistrer, je ne sais pas, des signaux, des chauves-souris par exemple. Le système total dort tout le temps. Par contre, dès qu'on capte une fréquence qui est propre à la fréquence de la chauve-souris, à ce moment-là, ça réveille le système complet. Et derrière, par exemple, si le système est équipé d'un enregistreur audio, à ce moment-là, vous pouvez commencer le data logging audio. Donc ça permet donc de sauvegarder, d'augmenter les autonomies des systèmes déployés. Puisqu'en fait, la plupart du temps, le système dort et se réveille uniquement lors de la présence d'un signal. Donc c'est Manon Fourniol qui est présente ici, qui donc est en thèse IM2NP, qui a développé et conçu le système. Donc effectivement, il fait donc une analyse en continu. Donc il regarde toujours, il analyse continuellement le signal entrant, avec une consommation de l'ordre donc de 120 microwatts dans sa première version et qui a été abaissée aujourd'hui de l'ordre de 10 microwatts dans la version actuelle. Une autre carte d'extension, donc je présente un peu tous les éléments du système. Donc ça c'est un enregistreur audio, faible consommation mais faible fréquence. Donc on est de l'ordre de 300 milliwatts en enregistrement pour du 16 bits mono à 62 kg samples par seconde. Elle peut fonctionner de deux façons différentes, ou en autonome, ça veut dire on n'a pas besoin de la carte mère pour la faire fonctionner, ou elle peut être utilisée en tant qu'enregistreur fille de la carte mère que j'ai présenté avant. Ce qui permet donc typiquement de programmer un enregistrement à une date donnée pendant une durée donnée et ainsi de suite. Les données sont enregistrées donc directement sur support SD, donc on voit ici on a le support SD. Et typiquement, cette carte, elle est utilisée, donc actuellement, on l'a placée dans des tubes sous-marins pour avoir une longue autonomie avec un encombrement réduit.
Elle est stéréo.
Alors, elle est 16 bits mono, 16 bits mono pour 16 bits mono ou alors stéréo 12 bits. Enfin vient notre système phare, donc c'est Aquali Life Sound, anciennement appelé Jason. Donc j'imagine que certains, vous en avez dû en entendre parler. Donc c'est une carte d'acquisition audio haute performance et très haute vélocité. Donc on peut faire des acquisitions jusqu'à 2 mégas samples par seconde dans le cas d'une utilisation stéréo et jusqu'à 5 canaux à 1 méga sample par seconde par canal en 16 bits. Elle a donc ce qu'on appelle un front-end analogique avec un gain ajustable. Donc en fait on peut venir via des petits sélecteurs régler le gain de la carte. Elle est équipée donc d'un filtre anti-aliasing, donc un anti-repliement d'ordre 8, donc ce qui veut dire qu'on n'a pas de repliement de spectre sur ce type de système. On peut éventuellement faire un préfiltrage, donc ça c'est à la demande de l'utilisateur, on modifie un petit peu le hardware de notre front-end analogique et ça permet d'ajouter un filtre aux fréquences souhaitées par l'utilisateur en entrée. Donc on filtre, on fait déjà un préfiltrage audio sur le signal d'entrée. Et elle sauvegarde ces données directement donc, sur support USB, donc typiquement un disque dur USB ou une carte micro SD mais montée sur un convertisseur USB vers micro SD. En termes de performance, donc, je vais vous montrer un petit peu ce que ça donne par rapport à un enregistreur classique Tascam. Donc typiquement on a ajouté donc, en entrée du système un sweep, donc c'est une fréquence qui varie au cours du temps, donc de façon logarithmique, et donc on fait varier la fréquence d'entrée de 1 Hz jusqu'à 1 méga. Donc on voit sur le système Kali-Life, on a bien la bande passante qui monte jusqu'à 500 kHz, sachant qu'évidemment une acquisition à 1 méga vous autorise un signal d'entrée de 500 kg maximum. Et là on voit bien sur Tascam que on a de l'aliasing d'une première part, et évidemment on sature à un peu plus de 50 kg. Alors effectivement, là, comme on peut le voir sur le spectrogramme, on a encore une petite bande, un léger bruit dans la bande 50 à 70 kg, mais on travaille dessus et ça va être enlevé dans les prochaines versions. Ensuite, typiquement, à quoi ça peut servir? Donc, typiquement, voilà une application qui a été faite. Donc, c'est par exemple l'observation des cachalots. Donc là, c'est juste une photo pour illustrer, mais lors de l'expédition de François Sarano au printemps 2018, donc c'était où déjà à l'île Maurice. Voilà, c'était à l'île Maurice. On a acquis donc ce type de signaux. Donc on peut voir ici un petit train de clic. Et du fait de la haute fréquence d'acquisition, on a une très très bonne résolution dans le temps et ça nous permet donc de pouvoir zoomer vraiment bien sur les signaux. Les applications de ce genre de choses, c'est en plus d'avoir une belle qualité de signal, c'est par la suite de faire tout ce qui est trajectographie. Donc Hervé Glotin vous en a parlé ce matin. Bon, également, on peut voir effectivement, on a pu découvrir aussi que certaines espèces émettaient jusqu'à, par exemple, dans le cas des dauphins d'Amazonie, des dauphins roses d'Amazonie, ils émettaient jusqu'à des fréquences quasi aussi hautes que 500 kg. Donc là, on peut voir qu'on a une très bonne résolution sur le signal émis par le dauphin. Et donc voilà, application typique, le tracking des ignores en Amazonie. Donc c'est, encore une fois, Hervé Glotin qui a mené l'expédition. Donc dans ce cas présent, il a déployé une antenne supérieure avec 7 hydrophones. Donc en fait, il a couplé 2 systèmes jason ensemble avec un hydrophone en commun sur les 2 cartes. Ce qui permet de synchroniser 2 cartes différentes. Tous les canaux sur la carte, donc les 5 canaux sont synchrones. Mais si c'est 2 cartes différentes, il faut bien un moyen pour pouvoir les synchroniser. Donc la solution qu'il a trouvée, c'était effectivement de câbler un hydrophone en commun sur les 2 cartes. Et il a pu donc observer ce type de signaux. Donc on voit bien des trains de clics émis par les dauphins. Et on reconnaît effectivement un pattern commun sur les 4 voies, mais avec des temps d'arrivée différents. Et à partir de ça, on est capable de reconstituer la trajectographie des ignas, donc enfin de l'espèce observée, en 3D, donc suivant la forme de l'antenne déployée. Donc typiquement, là on voit que on s'est déplacé comme ça, puis l'igna a fait un virage et est revenu vers l'hydrophone. Ensuite, enfin, donc pour finir, oui, voilà, pour finir, le but du système complet, ça va être de réduire au maximum la consommation énergétique afin d'acquérir des données sur plus long terme sans avoir à revenir sur la zone de mesure. Donc ce qui se passe, typiquement, la bonne chaîne complète du système, ça serait le trigger de signaux qui permet de déclencher les enregistrements quand les fréquences qui nous intéressent sont présentes. Puis ensuite, par la suite, réveiller le système, faire une pré-analyse du signal et si besoin, transmettre les datas afin de classifier les signaux, donc qui sont des opérations bien plus coûteuses en termes énergétiques. Voilà. Donc typiquement, voilà, au niveau du chronogramme du temps, on réveille donc la carte, on fait la mesure, on fait un pré-traitement des données, on transmet éventuellement si on veut transmettre l'information à distance, et ensuite on retourne en veille. Donc en fait 99,9% du temps le système dort. Il est réveillé uniquement lors de présence d'un signal. Voilà. Et évidemment, K-Life permet donc l'utilisation de protocoles joints, l'expérimentation. Donc typiquement, c'est le couplage de plusieurs cartes entre elles afin de joindre les protocoles. Par exemple, on peut joindre acoustique et mouvement pour l'étude des abeilles. Donc typiquement, vous instrumentez une ruche avec la carte Move qui permet donc de déployer des centrales inertielles, que vous couplez à une carte son, donc pour étudier le son des abeilles. Donc il faut savoir qu'une ruche émet un certain son en fonction du son émis par la ruche, donc toutes les abeilles qu'il y a dans la ruche. On peut connaître l'état de la ruche, savoir si elle est malade ou pas, ce genre de choses. Donc une ruche malade, par exemple, c'est quoi? Ça serait une ruche dont les abeilles seraient parasitées par le varroa, par exemple. À ce moment-là, elles émettent un son différent. On peut coupler effectivement donc mesure acoustique et mesure de luminosité. Donc pour étudier, par exemple, quel est l'impact de la pollution lumineuse sur le comportement des animaux. On peut coupler l'acoustique et les polluants chimiques. Donc ça, c'est plus pour, par exemple, pour étudier l'impact de la pollution sur un logement, typiquement, et à terme, par exemple, de définir un critère de qualité sur un logement. Par exemple, en ville, vous déployez la carte qui couple analyse chimique et analyse acoustique, et vous pouvez dire si le logement est bruyant, si on est sujet à de la pollution chimique. Donc, par exemple, s'il y a un autoroute qui passe pas loin, il va y avoir et du bruit et de la pollution. Et à terme, on pourra dire que c'est un logement qui aura, par exemple, une bonne qualité de vie ou pas pour l'habitant. Et ensuite, on est preneur de toute autre idée. Donc si vous avez des idées, on sera ravis de coopérer avec vous. Voilà. C'est à peu près tout pour moi. Et si vous avez des questions, je serais ravi d'y répondre. J'ai amené les cartes avec moi, donc éventuellement si vous voulez les voir, je pourrais vous les montrer.
Ouais, très bonne idée. La pause café, tu pourras te mettre sur le bureau là, elles seront en exposition.
Très bien.
Très bien.
Merci de m'avoir écouté.
Merci Valentin, c'était très clair. Les questions viendront plus tard, vous en avez tout de suite. Plus tard. Très bien. Donc maintenant, nous avons Adeline. So Adeline is a new tenure in our team, and she's expert in deep learning and satellite astrophysics and health senior.
Okay. So please let me know at the back if you can hear me. I need to be reminded regularly to boost up the voice signal. So my presentation is going to deviate a little bit from the bioacoustic topic, but remains in the ocean and marine mammal subject. I'm going to talk mostly about perspectives, what satellite imaging can do to help in studying our ocean in wide meaning. I'm going to talk about two main possible ideas. The first one is work in collaboration with the University of Bristol, with Rory Bingham at the bottom here. In fact, most of the images I'm going to show you on that topic come from him. He has worked on that topic in the last 5 to 10 years on with the oceanographic point of view, and the new collaboration is bringing the deep learning expertise to the project. And then in the second part of the short talk, I'm going to go briefly over that satellite imaging can also do to help with things like whales survey. So the first project, the one with the University of Bristol, is about mapping sea levels and while inferring what are the main sea currents from that mapping. The main idea is to be, well, the motivation for doing this is, well, there's quite a lot of motivations. The main ones are given here. Basically, it would give a better understanding of all the dynamics involved in all the ocean and all the interactions between currents and the coasts, the marine life, etc. And just a little bit of theory, that's the only bit of theory in this presentation. That's to try explain how we can get an idea of currents from satellite images. That is a very simplified view of ocean dynamics. You have a view from the side here and from the top there. And this theory is that there's two main balancing forces that makes the ocean dynamics. There is pressure, which comes from the atmosphere, winds, etc., and which make it so that the ocean has different pressure, so the level changes in different places, and obviously the water flows from high pressure to low pressure. And then another force is the Coriolis force that also creates a flow, but in another direction. And you obviously here a little schematic of how these two forces can combine to create, well, the final static equilibrium currents. And because of this theory, we know that the current is very strongly related to the pressure and to the sea level, because the sea level depends directly from the pressure. And so by mapping the sea level, we can we can integrate that in our models and infer what's the sea current. This model was a bit simplified. There is more to that. The main other aspect to account for is all the perturbations that can come and affect the sea level. Here, this model assumes that if there was no perturbation, no pressure gradients, nothing, the sea level would be flat. In fact, it's not quite right because the gravity field of Earth is not homogeneous, and so the sea level also varies with gravity. So we have to separate the sea level change due to currents and the one due to gravity. Luckily, we can do that with satellite imagery because we have information on all that. So this first image is an altimetry image. So satellites like the new JSON-3 has a really accurate altimeter sensor that can map the sea level from space, and we have this global map of sea level. And if we can combine that, with gravity. Our issue is that the sea level is in the order of 100 meters, has hundreds of meters variation, while what we are looking for, the currents, have small variations of the order of 1 meter. We need something very accurate. And so we need to have a very accurate modeling of the gravity field so we can find this tiny difference. That is another map which looks very similar to the previous one. but this one is a gravity field map. It looks so similar because the current effect on the sea level is tiny. And so this gravity map was made by another satellite named GOES very recently. And if we now want to combine the two, the altimetry, which gives us the height of the sea level, and the gravity, hopefully we get the sea current. We just subtract one from the other. In practice, we get something like this. We see lots of artifacts. The reason from these artifacts is noise and noise in our models. Because to get the gravity field map, we have to take raw measurements from GOES, input them to a gravity model, basically, and try to get a smooth gravity field from there. And there's always some both measurements and modeling errors. So that's where our work starts. We have these two measurements of altimetry and gravity, and we would like to get an accurate current map. There was some first attempts at denoising the map with some filtering. They found that was previous work before I joined the project. They found that the diffusing filter was reasonably good to recover some nice current features, but not completely satisfactory in many cases, and it required lots of fiddling with the filter to set it up. So what we're going to do with this project, which is starting pretty much now, so I don't have any results to show yet, is recover these current maps from the altimetry and gravity fields using deep learning. Right. And quickly, another possible application. This is a commercial satellite launched in 2009, which has a pretty good resolution of about 50 centimeters for 1 pixel in chromatic bands like this. And then it has several bands from blue, violet to infrared with a resolution of about 2 meters. This one is particularly interesting because it has this band named coastal band, which is used to map coastal areas or to detect or study sediments or phytoplankton, algae blooms, this kind of thing. So we can see a little bit through shallow waters. So that's particularly interesting for us. And using these images in 2014, there was one first attempt at detecting waves. What these people did is they took one image. One image is already big, it's 113 square kilometers. And in this single image, they first went to count the waves manually with visual inspection. They found about 50 probable waves, about 20 possible waves, and some signatures that looked like wires but was only in the underwater current. And then they try and make an automated method to replicate these findings. They made a very simple method with some thresholding of the images, some clustering and counting pixels, and if the blob size is the right size, they accept that right. So that's a good illustration that we can maybe use this kind of images to do a larger scale wave survey. If we're going to automate it with some methods that don't rely so much on thresholds and manual parameters, so again we're envisaging trying deep learning approach for that detection problem. Oh, something interesting. These images are composite images that fuse all the bands. These are what they identified as being waves. Sorry, you can't see very much here. If you're interested, you can see it in my screen after. And here, they showed in the paper some example of false positives, and they discussed that these here on that row could be bubbles, like air bubbles that come up, and that could be released by waves. So we are thinking maybe there is also something to do there. That would be interesting to look at if we can combine with in situ sensor maybe. Great. So that's it from me. Do you have any questions?
Do you know if there is some set of satellite images for previous years looking in areas where people recording?
Yes. I had a quick look at what satellites are available now. Most of them for that type of resolution are commercial, so we can buy the data and request data.
Because we could buy the satellite images for in the Siona experimentation of the summer and check how the way we tried it.
It's actually what they did in this work. They put this single image.
Oh yeah, so we should make the same for after the 12th of on devrait acheter les images de uniques et travailler dessus pour faire un concept. Ça ne doit pas être très cher. Tu as les contacts à Bristol pour les acheter ou passe par
À Bristol, ils font de l'altimétrie et
les auteurs de cet article pour comment acheter ça. Et de ce satellite, il faut la définition. Parce que là, on voit les bulles, on voit peut-être les bulles des balais.
il y a quelques autres qui ont la même définition, comme les feuillages ou
I've got two questions. First one for the detector part of your waves application. Do you know, in order to have more examples, which nearby application could generate some positive and negative examples to train your deep architectures? And if there are some similar application, maybe around the military stuff or some stuff like this, in order to train with more than 50 examples. So, or if there is a physical model to, I don't know, simulating the dive of any object into water. So, and
tracking images with images on them, so they can at least have to dive
okay, so it's a way to collect more positive examples.
the information that they can use to.
And my other question concerning the first topics are, so how do you plan to use ADN or others in order to do better, super resolution filtering, I guess, in order to construct some.
So we're looking at several ideas. It's also a huge project, so we're not on the but we have been considering, we're still considering either just analyzing the gaps,
Okay.
maybe with some kind of setup,
Okay.
or
Again.
Gann,
maybe taking the two images and trying to reconstruct the occurrence directly in our copy train with simulated data. But the issue with simulated data is that we would still have to know some of the when we get back to the
No more question? That was the field. Thank you, Adrien. Before the coffee break, we have Untitled, postdoc in CIMIC team and specialist in deep learning for detection and classification. And the talk he gives now is on bird songs or cause identification, adding metadata. So the idea is to show you that the process of any call or song is generic, and we can add metadata to enhance the classification. So with significant gain, and this is generic for whale calls or dolphin calls that we currently work on. So when you want, yeah.
Great. Okay. I got it. So this was this came a bit on short notice. It was a short rearrangement of the schedule. So this is a presentation I gave before in Avignon, and it's very technical compared to the other talks. But I hope you can follow it a bit. So this, as I said, was about birds and not whales, but the techniques should also apply to other kinds of animals. And what we were dealing with before in our research project was bird detection. So this is a simpler problem where we had some audio snippet, like 10 seconds, and we were just meant to tell if there is a bird somewhere in this recording or not. So what we basically want is a kind of mathematical function or a computer program that can take a spectrogram and tell us if there is a bird audible there or not. And we got a lot of data for this, provided by the organizers of this scientific challenge for bird detection. And the main takeaway here is we have, well, a lot of training data, like 44 hours, 16,000 of these short recordings, and each of them has a global label if there's a bird in there or not, but it doesn't say where in the recording the bird is. And the second takeaway is we have 3 different data sources, and one of them is, 2 of them are crowdsourced, and the third one is comes from unmanned recording stations in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And this was not available for training. We had this crowdsourced data for training, and for testing, some of it came from the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And the way we designed our mathematical function that solves our task is to use a neural network that we designed such that it first has to do some local prediction of whether there is a bird within 1.5 seconds. Then we take the maximum over these local predictions. The idea of this is to make the task a little bit easier for the network, because we know that for the global label here, it doesn't matter whether there's a bird at the beginning or at the end of the file or in the middle. If there's a bird anywhere, we know that the global label should be yes. So we can simplify the task for the network by designing the function like this. And just to demonstrate what this looks like, so we have a short browser demo here. We can upload some file. And we can also listen. Let's see if the sound works. No, it's only playing back here. Shall I try with this? Okay, let's try again. Okay, maybe we just forget about it. So this is it's a lot of noise, and in the middle here, there's one single tweet, like very far in the background, and the idea of this model doing local predictions and then taking the maximum is that it shouldn't matter how long the recording is. If there's some local prediction somewhere that's very confident, we know that the global label should be positive label. So we take the global maximum over all the local predictions And yeah, this gives us this opportunity, this probability, this property of being independent of the total recording length. We can even do try to fool the network. And we will upload it, and it's, you'll see there's no bird in there. People actually did that for a lot of the training examples. So people took their mobile phone, put it in there, and sent it off, and this got part of the training and test data for this challenge. All right, and these are the official results. So we had two different kinds of networks, but this one won this scientific challenge of detecting birds. So this is what we had before. And one interesting part is that the official results that were also tested on the Chernobyl data were quite a bit lower than the results we had internally when we only tested on part of this crowdsourced data. Because this data from the Chernobyl zone is much more noisier, or it has different recording conditions than the others. And this is difficult for the neural network to adapt to if we don't have this available for training. So now we were interested in identification. So what changes here is that we have recordings of very different lengths, and we're meant to predict for 1,500 different species. For each species, we're meant to predict if they're in the recording or not. And again, we're looking for some mathematical function to do that. And again, we are provided quite a lot of data. So this time it comes from xenocanto.org, which is a website where birders or enthusiasts and experts and anybody can upload bird recordings and say what kind of bird this is, and other people will check it and correct them if they're wrong, and add some information if there is some more birds visible, audible than the original recorder meant to record. So they went into the wood, they see some bird that is very special, and they record it with the directional microphone. So in most of the recordings there's just one bird, but sometimes there are birds in the background, and then sometimes they're annotated as well. So what we have here are like 250 hours of training data. But again, we don't know where in the recording the bird appears. We only know which birds are in the recording. And another thing that changed from compared to bird detection is that we also have some metadata available, like the recording date and time, and the geographic position, and the elevation, and some other data that I didn't use, like who recorded it. And the solution is, the one I chose was to train, or design two different neural networks, one for the audio, which is very similar to the one we use for detection, and a second one that processes the metadata. So each of the networks will give us some predictions on which species are in there. And actually these predictions are not just yes and no values, but some values between 1 and 0, where 1 means, yeah, I'm very confident the species is present, and 0 means I'm very confident it's not present. We get this both for the audio and for the metadata, and then we form an ensemble prediction by, we could just average the two predictions now, but it's better if we choose some different weights for the audio and metadata, and we optimize these weights on some validation data. And while we're at it, we actually can just train multiple audio networks, multiple metadata networks, and combine them with optimal weights to get even better results. So that's the basic idea. I will quickly go through what the networks look like. This is quite technical, but maybe it's interesting for someone. I hope. So the input here was recording at 22 kilohertz sample rate. We compute some spectrogram and apply MEL filter bank. This is compressing the frequency range or the frequency bands in a way that low frequencies are preserved at almost the full resolution, and higher frequency bands are summarized over longer frequency ranges. So it's some nonlinear frequency compression that is kind of similar to how human perception works. We're also more sensitive to frequency at lower frequencies than higher frequencies. And then we compress the magnitudes. And this is also more for a technical reason, but also a bit related to how humans hear. So if we were looking at the linear magnitudes here, it would all be black with some spots in there. So most of the values are very low, and then very few values are very high. And if we apply logarithm or some square root, for example, then the distribution becomes more Gaussian, and this works better for training. And also the loudness perception of humans is closer to logarithmic than to linear. That's why we often use decibels. And here the compression is not fixed, but also learned by the neural network. Then we standardize the spectrograms to make them more uniform over the different frequency bands, which is useful because we will be learning some two-dimensional features, some small features that we search everywhere in the spectrogram afterwards. So it's better to make it a bit more uniform. And we use two different neural network architectures. This is a rather simple convolution neural network with some convolution pooling or convolution pooling, and it will directly give us this local prediction curve. The other one is a residual network, but if you're not into deep learning, this will not be very important to you. So the other thing I changed was, instead of just taking the maximum here, I tried something that is a little bit less sparse, that will not only pick the largest one, but something between taking the maximum and taking the mean. Taking the mean would make us dependent on the length of the input, but it might be more robust than just taking the maximum. If there's one spurious detection somewhere, we are less confident that the bird is really present than if we have multiple detections. Most birds will not be only present at one spot in a long recording. So it makes sense to take into account more predictions for the global prediction again. And I tried another one where we actually asked the network to learn which parts to attend to in the over the time series. But I will skip over this. And in the end, there's softmax that will take all the 1,500 separate predictions and transform it into a probability distribution over the 1,500 species. And I took also used different variants for how to train the network, for how to form the targets. So we have these annotations of the foreground species and of the background species. And the simplest, the direct one, was to only use the foreground species because these are the only annotations I'm very sure that they are correct. And the second variant was to include the background species but weight the foreground species label higher than the background species label. So the network will be penalized more if it gets the foreground species wrong than if it gets the background species wrong. And then a third variant was something that was invented shortly before, which was called the born-again network, where you train a network on the data, you compute the prediction for every file, and then you train a neural network to reproduce the predictions of the first network. This doesn't sound very useful, but it gives a network that generalizes much better than the first one. Alright, and for the metadata, all we have to do is to take this and transform it into some vector representation. So So we can apply a neural network to it. We don't want to apply it to the text, obviously. And most interesting part here is maybe how I encoded the date and time. So I figured that we don't need to use the year, we only want to predict the species based on the seasonality. So we only take the month and day and transform it into the day of the year. If anybody has his birthday on February 29th, it's not in there. And then we don't want a sudden jump from the December 31st to January 1st. So I embedded it in 3 dimensions on a circle, so that 0 is here and then all the other ways come here. That way and the actual input to the network will be the 3-dimensional coordinates here. So we have 3 values, plus a 4th value telling whether the date was actually given for this recording, because not all metadata is always present. Then something similar for the time, where I take the minute of the day and also put it on a 3-dimensional circle. And longitude, latitude, elevation I just use directly. Then we standardize it and apply a very simple neural network on top. And this gives us the metadata network. So now we have different audio networks, different metadata networks. And we have to choose the combination weights. And for this I used a program called HyperOpt, which does something more clever than a grid search. So it has some Gaussian process in the background that learns so that picks some combination weights and then tries to find which ones work better and searches there a bit more until it can't find any improvement anymore. So that's how I got the weights here. And then these are the results on an internal split of the training data. So we got mean average precision of 0.7 for the foreground species if we just take into account the audio data. And we got 0.28 for when we just take into account the metadata. This is an accuracy of 20%. So in 20% of the cases, it can predict the foreground species correctly just from the date and the time and the location, which was surprising for 1,500 species. And the location alone was the most important information. If we combine this, we get this was a single audio model. If we combine multiple audio models, we get an improvement, and if we include the metadata, we get another improvement. And in the end, we scored the 2nd place in the official results. So everyone was allowed to submit multiple runs, and these are all from the Museum für Naturkunde in Berlin. And then ours was the next. Now that we have the model, we can actually do something more with it, to see what it does, to see if it's useful, or if it's, what it's actually doing. So this is the output it will give us normally. This is what I trained it for. Given an audio recording, it should tell me which birds are in there. And it will give me some probability for all the 1,500 species, and here I'm just showing the top 5. And in this case, these 2 are actually the correct ones. These are the ones that are in red, or the ones that were indicated there. And I don't know, I can't play the sound because I can't play sound. Sorry. Now what we can do is we can ask where they appear. This is I will just skip this. This tells us now at every position which are the most probable species. So now we see that this should be the blue species, the Rhinophila filvinia, and somewhere here is the orange species. I'm just calling it quickly. And we can go one step further. We can also compute which pixels in the spectrogram are most affect the predictions the most. And we can do that for every species. So we can ask which pixels in the spectrogram affect the prediction for this species and for this species. And this gives us kind of a mask or an extraction of these two birds from the spectrogram. Then I also tried the same with the metadata model, asking where should we look for some specific bird, some specific date at some specific time, and it gives me a heat map over South America, because all the birds are from South America. But apparently this is not very useful. Some of it is placed in the sea, so it's not the best way to ask such questions. We could go directly in the data, but I cannot use this neural network for it. Okay, I will skip this. Yeah, so some ways we could improve it is using a different network architecture for the audio data, because the winning approach used something different and didn't use metadata but still got better results. So this is one way we could improve it. And also we need to find a way to better cope with different recording conditions. As for bird detection, here it became apparent that when we were not using directional microphones, but like just specific acoustic monitoring equipment, it worked worse, because this was not included in the training data. And yeah, now we can probably apply this to marine mammals as well, because nothing of this was done specifically for birds, except maybe the sample rate of the audio signal, and yeah, what the spectrogram resolution looks like. But I don't know anything much about birds that I used for designing the neural networks. And what's maybe the most important part is that we can use weakly labeled data, like long recordings where we just know the presence, but we don't know where it is present. If we just have examples, yeah, enough recordings that either contain or do not contain a specific target class, this should be enough to train a neural network to detect this and even localize it. We just need a lot of data. Now then the question is, how do we get this much data? So here for the birds we have 350 hours of annotated data. How do we get the same from marine mammals? There's no crowdsourcing website, because there are not so many people diving and recording whales, and there are people going into the wood and recording birds. Okay, that's it from me.
When you learn your compression, your factor of compression from the exponential version of the input,
yeah.
Have you looked at the distribution you get after the training, or is it the one you showed?
It's similar to this one. So
similar to the right.
I think this is, yeah. So I only learned the exponent here.
Okay.
And the exponent, I think, was always around 0.3 or something, and maybe I even plotted this with 0.3, but it will look similar to this. It will look roughly Gaussian.
You know, this is similar to auditory system with a cubic compression.
Yeah, that's.
It makes sense.
People say different things on what exactly the perception for humans is.
I got a question. You model the part as a detection to provide ultra complex detection problems thanks to deep learning techniques. But my main question, why recurrent networks don't work, or not as efficient as your approach? Because I guess the first try you try to do is to train a recurrent network. No?
No, I didn't.
Ah, okay.
But I'm very convinced that it's not useful. It will train
So
much. It will train much slower.
It was my question. Why It's not
So-
useful to take the information of the sequence of birds, calls, and at
I
least
think-
integrated versus
Yeah.
40 seconds. Maybe can bring some extra point on some difficult bird species to be classified. I don't know. But,
So if the goal is to take into account more context, then we can just increase the receptive field of the convolution neural network as well. We don't need recurrent networks for that. But I think the kind of regularities that you're talking about are not very easy to extract from the training examples for a neural network. So I tried to use more context than these 1.5 seconds, and it didn't improve.
yeah, it's typical of local decision maybe. Even if it's integrated over
Yeah.
your 40 seconds after to classify, but it's mainly a local decision you are.
Yes, right now I'm just doing local
So the
decisions,
function
and
of
afterwards
sequence is absolutely not used.
I'm using, just on a very short time scale.
So
Yeah, but
there's
it
some
should-
room
it
of
should help.
improvement.
Yeah.
Or not, or you're saying that you are not believing it. That the sequence will be useful to find out.
In theory, yes. So I worked on music before,
Yeah.
and there's the same idea. Like,
Okay.
right, we did, for example, we did onset detection, or we just need to find the positions of all node onsets in there. And it also worked well with a very short-term model, although you might think that if we have a sense of the rhythm and things like that, it should help us to predict the onsets correctly, because we know where to expect the next node. Music is very repetitive, but still, if it didn't work to just throw this at the network and hope that it would extract these kinds of regularities. I don't know. It would be very interesting, but maybe need some more.
Yeah, because I'm surprised that in any music or detection classifications, I never seen before some typical recurrent networks.
Oh, there are recurrent.
LSTMs.
Yeah, there are LSTMs also for onset detection, for example.
Yeah, but they are not the first.
No, they don't learn much. They don't learn more than this local changes. It's very difficult to I don't know. Maybe you need to compress the.
Because the brain uses that.
Yeah, maybe you need to change the input scale so that it becomes more easy for the network to see long-term relationships.
Yeah. So maybe the size of the
Not
network is
directly
not
on
large
the
enough.
not directly on the spectrogram.
There is maybe too much degree of freedom in the songs, and maybe there is less degree of freedom in biosonar emissions. So learning peak train with recurrent network may make more sense. Because there is more systemic system into this search and observation biosonars and songs. Songs are free in terms of production, syntax, but sonar is not. So
Yeah, but also the calls here are also. This also looks very regular. This is already on a longer time scale than what I'm using for detecting them. It should be possible to go a little bit more long term.
25% just by the metadata is impressive. Of math. Over 1,500 species is very impressive.
Yeah, but it's also they are not all distributed equally.
So
And
I can imagine with a particular taxonomy we can even improve this kind of metadata. If we know that some species are working together, some time, some space, in some area, so
maybe.
can we
Also, we can use additional metadata. There are also initiatives that where people only upload sightings. So they only say, I saw a bird at this time, at this place. We could add this information to the metadata network. But here it was only for the recordings.
So maybe we shall have a last question, Jeffrey? No, you don't. So we shall have the coffee and more discussion at the coffee. Thank you. Coffee is already served at the back of the room.
Oh.
Okay, I'm from region Hauts-de-France for funding my thesis. I will try to stay simple. You won't need to have taken advanced courses in deep learning or in Victor or something else. So if there is something you cannot understand, feel free to stop me and ask me some questions. So first, so usually in bioacoustics, we have some real data with some large databases, and in those data sets, what you usually want to do, you want there is many problems, and some of them are TDOA estimation, because sometimes if you don't really know your sources, your signal, and you don't really know the background noises, it could be hard to have a nice estimator for the sound, to have some quite nice TDOA. The other issue you might have is to do some classification. On your data sets, you might not know all the classes or all the animals that are present in your data sets, or you might want to try to find some way to distinguish between two animals. So in that way, you want to do some classification. And but most of the time, with previous talks, we have seen that they have the labels on those datasets. But when you don't have the labels, you need to find an unsupervised way to distinguish between your species. So for that, you need to have an unsupervised way to do some classification. I will go back on that later. And the last problem, so for example, for sperm whales, when a sperm whale emits a clicks, the clicks is composed of many pulses, so P0, P1, P2, P3, P4, which are echo inside the head of the animals. And you might want to find a way to have an unsupervised, to have an estimator of the API for the animal. Unfortunately, since we have only real data sets with no label on it, we need to first try our network on synthetic data to have some kind of metrics or some kind of measurements to see how well it performs on those tasks. So for that, I will present three synthetic data sets which aim to measure these networks on the three challenges we have here. But first of all, here are the data sets we have, the real data sets, to show you that not only we can have large data sets, but they can be also quite different. So even if you have a way that work on one data set, it might not work on the other one. So the first data set we have is the Boomix data. So Boomix, we already talked about it this morning. It's a sonar buoy near Toulon. 27 meter deep with 50 kilohertz stereo recording over large periods of time. So it's a really large data set. So of course, you have a lot of samplings. So if you want to label it manually, you need a lot of time or a lot of people working on it. The other data set we are working on is the Sarano data set. So we already talked about it, but it's a data set near surface with 600 kilohertz recordings. So it's a lot compared to 50 kilohertz, but it can have a lot of precision in the TDOA, for example. 3-channel recordings. So this was a previous antenna which which had only two channels. The new one had another hydrophone over there, which had a third channel, a third stereo channel, which helped to localize the sperm whorl. And it also has one video channel, which can be used to link the sound to the sperm whorl, because we can record the sperm whorl with the GoPro and link the position using the 3 hydrophone and the sound signal. This is an autoencoder. So it's a type of neural network where it's kind of shaped like an hourglass with a bottleneck in the middle called the embeddings. This type of network, in fact, is used to try to compress the information. Basically, with this type of networks, you give it an input and you try to reconstruct the output, but in the middle, you only allow the network to have a really small number of information. So, for example, if you give it a picture in the input, the picture, you could say it's the size of the picture is the number of pixels inside of it. But if in the middle you say you're only allowed to have only one number, then the network, to reconstruct the picture, will need to find what's described the most this picture. So a really simple example could be circles. For example, if you fit your network lots of points describing your circle, so just random points with a random angle on the circle, and you are saying, okay, on the output, I want you to reconstruct me the same circles with the same radius. That's your task. You're not explaining to the network what is the radius. You're just saying, I give you one circle, I want the same circle in the output. And you only allow your network to have one information in the middle. Then, what your network gonna learn is the radius most of the time. But it's not clear, it's not something magic, so most of the time the network might learn something else which is not linked to the circle, to the radius angle. So for example, here you could have, for example, the radius is not, for the embeddings, is not exactly the same radius. If here is the plot of the radius in the input, and here is the value of the embedding. For example, if we take another case, here in the input I give it picture of circles, and in the output I told him recreate me the same picture. As you can see, here it's not a straight line anymore. And your network learned some other kind of property. So maybe it's still the radius, but maybe the embedding is not directly the radius. Maybe it's something proportional in some way with some function to the radius. And you can also see that you have some kind of non-linearity towards the edges. Another thing that your network might do, if you never give your network some example of circles with a radius around 30, for example, the network might not try to reconstruct them because he never saw them, and he will use its parameters to try to do something else. So what you might have is embeddings that are not continuous. You might have this part for the smaller circles, then a clear cut, and then maybe something even reverse for the rest of the embeddings. So, in conclusion, autoencoders are really nice for learning some invariant parameters that you might not know about, but studying the embedding afterwards might be a complicated task because the embeddings might not be something continuous, even though there are some methods that can help you to have something more continuous and more straight and more linked to the physical parameters. So, in this work, in this talk, I will present another version of the embeddings of an autoencoder. So what we did was take the same autoencoder, we give it as an input the stereo sound recording, and the output was the same. We asked the network to reconstruct the stereo sound signal. The only thing we changed was, instead of having a simple decoder, we had one decoder that was creating one signal, and another branch that was creating two signals that we forced to be something like a Dirac, which is something that when you use a convolution with your signal, that will kind of shift your signal. So basically, what we want is to force the network to reconstruct the signal over there and to reconstruct the position of the sound over there. Since the stereo signal, you assume that in your stereo signal you have one sound source that arrive at two different times, the network should be able to reconstruct with only one signal the two channels. So to test this idea, we first tried on a simple synthetic database where we used what is called Gabor or Morley wavelet, which is basically a pure sine with a Gaussian envelope. We had some random shift to this signal and another random TDOA to the other signal. And then for each sample, we had a random amplitude, a random carrying frequency, and a random support, which is the size of the envelope. Of course, this is a clean signal. We also added some random noise to make things a bit more real and a bit more complicated for the network. So previously, with the example of the circles, the embeddings was the size of the embeddings was only 1, because with circles you can encode them with only the radius. But with something more complicated, you want to have more embeddings to increase your bottleneck size to allow the network to encode more information. The only issue with that is that in this case we chose to have an embedding of 128. The only issue is that we cannot visualize an embedding of 128, so we will use a technique called TSNE to project the embeddings down to 3 dimensions to be able to see some kind of things happening in the upper dimension. So, for example, you will miss something and some things, and your embeddings will not be exactly the copy of what's happening in 128 dimensions, but you will still have the cluster. So, for example, here we had some kind of families with previous datasets because we chose to have 5 different frequencies. Of course, not all the examples had the same exact frequency. We had some Gaussian distribution around that. And as you can see, what the network learned was 5 clusters of the families. So in 3D, and you have so the 5 clusters of families, and inside you have the example that the network wasn't able to reconstruct because they were below the signal to noise ratio to a certain threshold. And so in that case the network prefers to reconstruct 0, so no signal, instead of reconstructing something that will not match the input. With this kind of network, you can also do some kind of auto-denoiser, because the network, since you have a bottleneck of information, is unable to reconstruct the random noise. So in the output, you will have the clean signal, and not the clean signal plus the random noise. Another color map we can add, instead of the frequency of the family, is the center. As you saw in the previous slide, each example were shifted randomly with by some number, and if we add as a color map this information, you can see that the network also learn and also encode this center, and in the same way we can plot the TDOA, which the network did learn, so it's a bit harder to see, but the network did learn the TDOA for each family, so that's why it's in another dimension, in fact. So for the second dataset, we wanted to test if the network was able to also learn the IPI. So for this dataset, instead of having simple Morley wavelet, we use some kind of model to have something closer to sperm whole clicks with more complex envelope, which is here in black dots, and but with only a simple carrying frequency. So the same frequency. In the same way, we have some random shift and some random TDOA, but also some random IPI, which construct many families of IPI. And to also be closer to sperm whales, the pulse P1 has the opposite phase of other pulses. Unfortunately, this network was unable to classify the families by IPI. So when we look at the embeddings, we weren't able to see any classification by IPI, but the network was still able to classify them by frequency. This figure is a bit more complicated, but as I told you, the network were doing some kind of denoising. So when you want to compute the TDOA, what you usually use is the cross correlation. The only issue is that with the cross correlation, when you have random noise, your cross correlation will make some mistakes. So here, with a simple cross correlation, you can see the prediction depending on what error you allow yourself to have. And here you have the same simple cross correlation but done on the denoised version of the signal using the autoencoder. And the other thing we used was GCC-ECA. So GCC is a generalized cross correlation. It's a method to estimate the background noise to have better result with the cross correlation. But as we can see, we had better results using the autoencoder than using generalized cross correlation. I will not talk about the upper figures. Maybe a bit just what I can say is that all the other fix you will find are in fact the API, because the cross-correlation error will be linked to the API, because sometimes when you do the cross-correlation, the cross-correlation might match two different pulses together, which will add the API as an error. And for the last dataset, I will talk about the last thing we tried. So this one, since we knew the API was unlearned by the autoencoder, we tried to see if the autoencoder was able to classify pulses with the same carrying frequency, but with harmonics with various amplitude of harmonics. So two signals with the same carrying frequency, but some signal with, for example, the harmonic number 2 with twice the value of another signal with the harmonics twice the amplitude of the other harmonic. And so once again we had a better result with autoencoder to predict the TDOA. And here we can see the result. So we use the method on the embeddings this time, not on the TSNE of the embeddings, to compute a result and to compare it to see if the network was indeed classifying or not each families independently. For the first dataset, since it was really simple, even with a simple autoencoder, we had a good result to classify the families independently. Here we compare the autoencoder to random neighbors to see what the score would have been if we didn't classify the embeddings, the families. Here it's the second data set. So once again we are better than the noise. And we have better score than the frequency. Unfortunately, as you can see, we have really bad results for the API because we are unable to classify them. The API are really random for the embeddings. And for the last data sets, here you can see that once again we are able to classify the families. And we are doing it better than with a simple autoencoder. So it kind of shows that with this extra bunch, we can force the autoencoder to have a more physical representation of the signal than with a simple autoencoder. Even though it still needs some fine-tuning, we have still some other experiments to try to modify the architecture to have better results and better representation, a better physical representation of the input signal, to have a better unsupervised way to analyze a large data set. So, thank you. Do you have some question?
Do you have an intuitive explanation on why the autoencoder is better than generalized transformation? Because there is some complex covariance that is taken into account?
No. So what we tried with different version of the generalized cross correlation with the various weights, and if it was better, it was because we also plot, since it's a synthetic data set, we also have the clean signal. And what we saw, it was that during the training, the network was not reconstructing the noise, but was only reconstructing the clean version of the signal. And it was doing it really he was doing really great at this task, even though it was not his main task. We were never giving the network the clean signals. It was just that the random noise was just so random for the network that it was unable to encode any any noise in the embeddings, it was just able to learn the clean signal. So since we had some clean outputs of the signal, a cross correlation of clean outputs is doing better than a cross correlation of noisy inputs, but with weights to say where is in fact the signal in the noise. Because what GC-Silica is doing is simply adding more weight to some frequency bin by saying in this frequency bin you have more signal than in the other frequency bin, but you still have some signals that is hidden in the noise for other frequency bins. So you still miss some part of the signal, and you can't really do a nice cross correlation. But of course, this was done on random noise, and on real data, it might be less effective because on real data, you do not always have random noise, random weight noise. Sometimes you have convolutive noise, and this kind of noise might be learned by the network because it's not totally random. It depends on the signal.
Do we have more questions? The next speaker is...
Yes. Do you have some more slides or no? No, okay. You didn't show really the SNR improvements, but do you have this slide?
Oh no, I didn't put the SNR improvement.
Okay. So
the next speaker is Latin on behalf
for
of
Julie.
Patrick.
For Julie and Frank, who are in Chile, and the video conference was not so easy to install, so I will briefly give their results, which are towards blue whale studies. So Julie is doing a PhD in Toulon. Okay. And Frank is now a member of the team and is also now in Chile. So they are one of the two first bioacousticians in Chile. Previously, Susanna Buchan was postdoc in Chile and did some bioacoustics since 4 years, but she was mainly alone, and they joined the effort. And now we have results about first a new methodology to assess the decrease of the frequency of the whale song. So it's a collaborative work, also taking part of CNRS action called STICAM Sud that we had, and the idea is to look again to this frequency decrease with a new analysis. So blue whales are reparted in many places, and the one in Chile coast, from this point to this point, are singing in 3-4 different ways. And as we said already with Jenny this morning, McDonald did a review on this decrease, and he shown that in North Pacific, North Atlantic, South Ocean, East Indian, there is evidences of this decrease, and we wanted to show that it's also the case on this Chilean whale that has not been yet computed, and we wanted to compute this very accurately. So this is a song of blue whale. There is many songs you could listen after at the final break, but it's quite long to listen to sound. So let's go through time frequency representation, and this is built on 4 units, A2, B2, C2, D2 for the Pacific song number 2. And we look in detail to the structure of these units, and we found that they are pulsed. This was known, but that is meaning that you have 2 ways to compute the pulsation. Either you look at the frequency peak after a fast Fourier transform, so you get a frequency peak, which is fundamental, or you can compute autocorrelation of your songs, and you get a delay. So they are not really the same according to the time windows, and to other average you can compute using methods for a better accuracy in the autocorrelation. And we will see on these recordings from north of South America coast to south, recordings from 2005 in the 90s, these results. And so this is a result based on the peak frequency from 96 to today, with recordings we did. And you see this very clear decrease, which is mainly linear. And if you compute it with the second method based on the autocorrelation, you get an even more accurate correlation because of trick in the computation of the autocorrelation. Okay, we did want to check if another part of the songs which are called the set 1, we have the same type of decrease. So these song types are unit A, B, C. They are structured differently than the previous one. And here again we have this nice slope computed by the two methods. And so to resume, if you look at the decrease in percentage based on previous studies from 1960s to now, on the study we did on 3 different types of songs and units, we have exactly the same slope, which is minus 0.56 or minus 0.57, compared to other studies that showed various decrease. So we think the computation we realized is maybe accurate, and this slope is a real slope. Okay. And the second work Julie did is a challenge to localize with only one hydrophone, blue wave. So this is based on HPC, which is meaning hypercomputer. It means clusters of CPUs. And the idea is that if you have a bathymetry, a known bathymetry, the sound in this geometry will travel differently than in a uniform space. And this travel will be reflections at the bottom, and the sound will get through the bottom, or will reflect on fields, mountains, and surface also will be taken in account, surface reflections. And all this travel will be computed according to a model that has been used for earthquakes localization. This is called SPECFEM, and this model is based on a finite element decomposition of a volume in 3 dimensions. So this is a challenge, because cutting a space in small blocks is not so easy when the space is not uniform. But anyway, we did emit in this model the pulses of the blue whale, and we did inverse the question. Instead of guessing for each position of the whale what we could find at one position of the receiver, we considered the receiver to be at many places, and we did the simulation in reverse. So the spec is the same if we travel from A to B or B to A. This is reciprocal. So with this trick we did faster, and we took in account the sound speed, the sound source of course, and the isobath of the place we did the experimentation, which is in Corcovado, and we did one also in Chanyara. Okay, so this is a some profile. We use the information of the we use the information of the geophysics of the place, These are isobats. This is the song we used as a test. And finally, these are the stations we placed to record the sounds. And this is the way we built everything on place, because there was no lab for 10 hours away, and everything has been built by our team. Okay, so finally what we get, we go directly to the results, is this density of possible presence of the singer in latitude and longitude. And this probability or similarity or likelihood, is increasing, is the maximum here. And this is where the whale has been seen singing at this time. So it shows that the method is accurate, but unfortunately we had only one visible singer on this full experimentation. Other singers were not present during the recordings or were not seen during the recordings. But we don't have false or wrong results neither. We have one result and it's positive. And simulations are also correct. So we think the method is accurate. And we will use other implementation. We will run this on historical data on other places where sometimes the historical data gives a place of seeing whale and recorded whales. So these are an overview of works in Chile on blue whales, low frequency songs, and because they are low frequency we can make big cubes to simulate, compute the propagation of these sounds, and then we can do estimation of the position using only one hydrophone. This will not work with whale singing higher in frequency because the blocks will be much lower in size, and then the computation will be too costly. This is already kind of 1,000 hours of computation, so distributed in several CPUs, but we couldn't make more for today. But maybe with new computers we could go in humpback whales and maybe in other whales with only one hydrophone and low bathymetries. That's it. So thank you, Julie and Frank.
Right, we have time for questions.
Question for last session of discussion. Yeah. Okay, so the next is Hill. You have your PC. So we now have two last talks are towards large-scale monitoring, and you will have an example on Earth studies, mammal Earth studies, on large-scale monitoring with the work of Tokyo University that will present our colleague Hill. And after we have the last talk with Jan giving automatic fast survey of thermite.
Okay. Bonjour and good evening. And I think I have to intensely talk louder because I'm quite sleepy right now. So thanks for taking your time, and I'm quite fortunate to visit and participate in this workshop because this is totally unexpected. I just contacted him last week. So, okay, this is the topic of what I'm actually studying. And in short, I'm not specialized in signal processing as well as interface design, but I do the two topics usually. Wearable, animal wearable sensing system interface, and also extract the data through the sensors and how to visualize it and use as an interface design as a fashions or things like media artwork we usually present in exhibitions
or galleries. So that kind of domain I'm actually studying. So the project I started after the Fukushima issue is I just started worrying about how about the animals will be and how do we able to monitor it and what they're actually doing. So that's why I studied microphone issues. We placed a microphone in a prohibited exclusion zone here, and you can actually hear the live sound from the website right now, but I don't just talk about too much detail. And I have explanation videos that you could easily understand. And this is actual
このプロジェク
exclusion.
トでは福島第一原子力発電所から10キロ離れた立ち入りが困難な帰還困難区域内の今この瞬間の環境音をリアルタイムに24時間配信します。線量の高いこの空間に生息する動物の今この瞬間の様子を皆さんの携帯やパソコンを通じてお伝えすることが目的です。原子力災害についてメディアで伝えられる多くの情報は被災地の現状についてです。それはそれほどリアルタイムではないのと今後数十年続けてくれるわけではありません。私たちは2011年3月11日の翌日からこのプロジェクトの準備を始めました。通常であれば1ヶ月程度で終わる作業ですが、実に5年の時間を要しました。それでもやらなければならなかったのには理由があります。かつて人と共存していた生き物たちは人がいなくなったこの場所で今この瞬間も生きているからです。私たちは離れた場所で暮らす人間と未だ取り残されている生き物たちの間をネットワークを介してつなげ続けたいと考えています。この空間でそう遠くない未来に途絶える命もあれば新しく生まれてくる命もあります。この先生き物たちがどう変わっていくのかを見守り続けたいのです。私たちはこうした環境問題をリアルタイムに観察し記録するシステムの研究を行ってきました。これまで10年以上の連続運用と記録の実績があります。まずは廃炉作業が完了する日を目標にこのプロジェクトを続けます。
So it's almost how many years? 7 years since the incident, and I spent 5 years for preparation as well as this kind of exhibition style. Simply because sensitivity of the issues, and this is exclusion zones, and keeping a permission to enter the zone is very difficult. That's why I decided to present the work outside Japan mostly until finally this year. So we had an exhibition in Tokyo finally. So this is very crucial to keep the system running in a zone with government approval. But there is still problems. There are actually additional 499 locations. There are actually projects prepared by the government in the zones. And let me show you the zone relationship. This is Fukushima nuclear power station, you can see. And there are 3 zones: the blue zone, the yellow zone, the red zones. As you can imagine, you could easily go enter the blue zones, become open right after the incident, several months later, because of the major street in this area. The yellow zone is still in the middle. Decomposition process and the construction progress is still going on, but quite yellow. I mean, it's okay to go, but it depends on participant, anyone who wants to go. And red zone is clearly prohibited, excluded zone, because since after, even 7 years after, there's no decomposition was done at all. So if we go there, simply we get the excluded exposures, and it's not good for health. So if we stay longer, like several days continuously. And the amount of radioactivity radioactive material is, if you imagine standing naked outside the International Space Station, this will equal amount of exposures if we stay there. And so what I was doing for the 5 years is, okay, we have to build the power pole, and we have to apply for the satellite internet or a commercially available system, and we have to get a normal contract to keep the system running for coming several decades. So we build a power pole, yes, and we asked the constructor, subcontractor to move these housing cases from the factories, and we also have the special permission that we were able to enter the zone. And also, the company asked for compensation because once vehicle was used in a zone, by the law, we can actually remove or move out from the zone itself. So we have to pay the compensation as well. And the next day, we built a satellite internet commercially available to make sure that we can keep it running. And so the finally electric company did the electric construction, and we usually now we have a contract, and I usually pay 5,000 yen equivalent to the 50 euro every month. In addition, we pay 150 euros for satellite internet as well as several LTE mobile lines available now. And it was done by 2016 March. And right after we decided to do the live streaming as well as the data archiving as well. And for the field encoding system, as you can see, the microphone, the amplifier, the encoder, the routers, and power distributor, we usually commercialize product because we have to prepare for the extra backup, and probably the frequent replacement should be done by no technically expert people. And we also, the data archiving system, very large amount, several terabyte storage data available on campus. And this is actual collaboration we finally started in 2016 or 17. That's why I decided to visit here often. And we extract the data set, and we add the CDN networks, and we build annotators. And then we also implement the interaction interface between users to extract the data set from the users. And this is already just an example. So for the first study, we focused on Japanese bush warbler, as you can see here. And we decided to extract the frequency of two specific vocal activity, call for and KK. And you can see it. And if you look for some of the detail, you can actually see the paper as well. And also, as previous presenter is, well, he wasn't here, we actually asked him to collaborate to have a similar interface design, the online collaboration annotation system developed, and we're asking users to present, to detect the presence of vocal activity or not, yes or no, within 40 seconds of recording part. So we had the opportunity to present the system, and what we actually came to a final conclusion is we succeed to continuous 1 year of recording from 2016 to June to 2017 May, and after that we still keep recording. But as you could see, there are some differences between the spring and summers. Based on these visualizations, you could it's possible that. Okay, could you do you remember the actual conclusion from this kind of visualization? What interpretation was, vocal activity usually expected highest at the springtime, like they think really most. But this graph showing that more than summertime they think more the time, more than that of springtime. And we have still technical problems as well as improvement necessary to keep recording or keep processing the data itself. So this is still ongoing. And also other project I personally started, this was about study when I was master's student 10 years ago. And how do we able to extend the sensing range? Because fixing, that kind of fixing station takes really quite a long time, as well as the maintain really takes labor intensive work. And if we want to build 499 stations. That's not possible. And animal data sharing mechanism for wildlife content is asking animal to extend as well as data share between the accumulated and observed data between the individuals. And also the last part is how do we ask them to upload the data by themselves. And the first study was partially did the experiment on the actual Fukushima site, and okay, it was 10. So that fixed stations have power cables available and internet connections available. So the idea is asking them to carry sensing device, extracting the spatial information as well as health information. That's normal issue from things that from here. So the system is designed to exchange the information when the two individuals meet accidentally. That's always happens. The difficulty is how do we extract, how do we detect this interaction time? It's only the time the system allows to turn on the communication device in turn so that they could exchange information one by one and finally came to the fixed stations. And the other issue is how do we ask them to extract the data? So every individual animal has specific response to the one specific structures. Just like a kitty. If you maybe seen the website, but kitty really like to stay in a box, like Amazon box, any boxes. And each individual, any species, they have specific reaction to the specific structural stimulus, which is whenever they say it, they cannot stop doing it. So using that behavioral response and combined with the system architectures, trying to extract the information as well as trying to do the wireless sharing. So very short presentation, but this is progression planning. So in the last 2 years, almost 3 years, we succeeded to 20,000 hours of recording, was done by the satellite internet multiple LTE lines. And we only succeeded to analyze 9,000 hours of data. But we still keep recording. We have to figure out how to analyze the data. And also, there are always initial planning to use the uncompressed web file, because I didn't, no one really liked the MP3 file. But we need to include the bandwidth, and we also have decided to have a special support from the National Institutions Network. So we are expecting to include the bandwidth, and we were able to succeed to change the format. And also, recently there are wildlife damaged animals, I mean, destructive animals. These populations really become large, especially the dawn, because of renewable human activities. So we have some collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry and Fishery, especially in that zone, specialized. Also, when we talking about this kind of system, we need a large amount of data set from the users. And this is called cloud sensing, as you know. But one of the difficult problems is how do we increase amount of data set? How do we engage participants to come to the website and to increase interactions as well as number sampling? So that's why I decided to do some science communication study for science education people that using the issue of what is happening in environmental problem in the field and trying to let them, the student or primary school student, to let them know. In turn, the system itself is extracting the reaction, which is possibly the timing of bird syncing. So this kind of science communication design was actually happy. Actually, we are preparing right now. Well, that's it. Thanks for your attention. Any question?
Would you think of using this kind of network undersea on turtles or other animals?
Oh, what do you mean, undersea?
Underwater?
Oh, underwaters. Okay. Similar ideas, we decided to do the biologists, especially because of the Fukushima issues. And I'm not sure how to do the sea turtle in French.
Sea turtles or other
Yeah.
would be vector instrumentation.
Right.
So, do you know if there is some study near Fukushima undersea about the behavior of animals?
My group, one of the group postdoc, she is succeeded to specify that one specific individual regularly goes to very close to the Fukushima nuclear power station accidentally. So that one specific individual takes a regular trip from the southern part of Japan, Beidou Island, to the near the Fukushima nuclear power stations. But it wasn't happening after the incident. They were originally do the regular trip between the regions, and we succeeded to use a sensor device and place the surface of the sea turtle itself, and we extracted the GPS information when the species was very close to the eastern Fukushima power stations. That is possible as a studies directions, but especially this is very time-taking process, especially for preparations. But basically, yes.
I've got one remark and one question. I'm surprised that the most dangerous part of Fukushima is not close to the seashore, but more inside the mainland. I'm very surprised. I was expecting the opposite. And so I don't understand why.
Okay, that was original understanding. Even the Japanese government, they say the radioactive materials and the amount of materials decreased by the diameter and distance. That's why original evacuation planning was done that way. However, it didn't that way, and they found out there are geological reasons mountains exist, and they block the wind blowing the material from the nuclear power station. That's why the you could see the website. The radiation is actually really higher if we simply go to the north west, not the simple diameter way.
And my question is concerning the way that the animals are more or less forced to go on a specific